Okay, we're here today out in the orchard, a little look-see at the principal factor influencing the size tree you're going to get, and that would be what is the rootstock that the variety, in this case Mutsu, is grafted onto. So we have two examples here. They're both in the category of semi-dwarf, but one way more vigorous than the other. Behind me here is again the apple variety Mutsu, a really underappreciated, unsung variety emanating from Japan. In the early part of the 20th century, the Japanese started a very ambitious and subsequently very successful apple breeding program. Mutsu was its first release in 1948, and it's more known for its huge success with the Fuji apple. At any rate, Mutsu is large, sometimes as much as a pound, and late cropping, October, although it's early blooming. And in a little aside here, normally the Mutsu is an early bloomer and starts to express flowers in as early as late Feb, certainly March, and by now, the middle of April, it's bloomed, set fruit, and fully leafed out. Not so this year. We are having an extended wet and cold winter, the second one in a row. But things are coming alive here, and so we'll be good. Mutsu itself is a very vigorous variety, say as compared to Caucasus Orange Pippin, which is genetically a weak variety. So the size of your tree is largely controlled by two factors, principally the effect of the rootstock, but in a secondary manner, what is the inherent vigor of the variety being grown? An example on M7, which we're going to look at in a minute here, Mutsu will be 8-10 feet or so, and Caucasus Orange will be 6-8 feet. But rootstock effect, it is huge in terms of determining the size tree you'll get. And with apples, again, there's a gradient of about a half dozen, 8, even 10 different rootstocks, from mini dwarf to full size. So this is M106, can reasonably give you a tree in the vicinity of 10 to 15 feet tall, and that appears to be true. Despite our efforts to keep it shorter by pruning, pretty much any upright branch will be thinned out. This tree, incidentally, has not been pruned this year. We'll have to get after it like pronto. But the control of tree size via rootstock is a genetic thing. And it's just built into it. Dwarfing rootstocks have less root mass, less efficient roots, and they store carbohydrates that fuel growth less than full-size trees. And then they manufacture growth hormones, both in the roots and in the shoots that are sent throughout the tree to stimulate vigor, vegetative growth. And then, although it's kind of reductive and anthropomorphic, basically the tree sends the message, don't grow so much, fruit a bunch. And not just fruit a bunch in terms of quantity, which is true, but do this early in your life. And this term is referred to as precocity. So M106, a rather large tree, particularly with a very strong variety. And think about it. The care, the pruning, the thinning, and the harvesting of this tree, three principal activities. It would take an experienced vet, maybe 5 or 6 ladder sets, and maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to prune this tree. When we look at a more dwarf example here shortly, I would say a whole lot less time involved. So think about matching the vigor of your apple variety in this instance with the vigor or the dwarfness of the rootstock. Okay, point and counterpoint. Again, Mutsu, a very vigorous apple variety, on a less vigorous semi-dwarfing rootstock, M7. So what I've got here is a 22-year-old tree at full size that's effectively about 8-9 feet tall. It has some branches that wander up a little higher 11, 12, but effectively an 8, 9 foot tree, and effectively a pedestrian tree. That is, by and large, I can do everything I need to do: prune, thin, pick from the ground, or with a slight stepladder assist. The dwarf tree, again, is so much easier and safer to manage than any situation that involves ladders. With the big Mutsu, like I said, an experienced pruner, a number of ladder sets, hour and a half, 2 hours. This tree behind me here could be handled from the ground by an experienced pruner, again, in maybe 10, 15 minutes on an annual basis. It's certainly easier to reach for thinning and reach for harvest come October. So think about, again, matching the vigor of your variety with the nature, dwarf or not, of the rootstock. And this M7 is probably maybe your best. It's the sweet spot with having enough vigor, because some very dwarfing rootstocks are, in truth, especially in organic growing conditions, not vigorous enough to get you much tree. But balancing inherent vigor rootstock gets you a size manageable tree. A bit on these terms I'm bandying about: M106, M111, in this case M7. A lot of our apple varieties are grown on rootstocks that emanated in England at various research stations. Principally one called Malling, another one called Merton, and yet another one called Long Ashton. So rootstocks often are represented or named in an alphanumeric manner. That is, M, or MM, M in this case being Malling, where it was originally bred, and so it's alphanumeric. M, Malling station. M7, it just means that was the 7th plot in the gazillions of plots in research trials that they had. And there's no correlation between the number in the rootstock and the vigor of the tree. This is where you need to consult charts and or memorize what is the expected height. And expected height, you notice how I'm going like this. I'm not nervous, but it's variable. It depends on, again, the inherent vigor of the rootstock, yeah, the inherent vigor of the variety, yeah, but also your growing conditions. What is the soil like? What is your climate? So there's a number of factors. My point here, and there is one, is that it's not an exact science, but you'll get a range of what size tree you can expect. You also, but in a much less pronounced manner, can control the height of the tree with pruning, and that is by employing some thinning cuts and redirective cuts to keep the tree from going upward. But this is a minor thing compared to the built-in genetics of dwarfing rootstocks.